Hmm?
You are in.
Oh, okay. You just looked.
So, yeah, make sure it's recorded. Yep, it's got a REC written on it, which is. And I'll switch this on here now.
Yeah.
Let's see if this works. Play record.
Oh.
That's moving. That's great. So let me start off, Stephen, with the first question which I've got here is, where were you born and when?
Where was I born and when? I was born in South London in Sydenham, 1920. So I'm 80 now, just in case.
That's interesting because Sydenham is where Dennis Gifford comes from.
Uh-huh.
And Joe Morgan, who I interviewed a few years ago, is from the same area.
Uh-huh.
Quite interesting, near the Crystal Palace.
Well, yes.
Do you remember the Crystal Palace at all?
Oh, yes.
When you were, before it burnt down?
Yes, we moved to Beckenham. I remember seeing it being burnt down from our back windows in Beckenham in 37. Sorry, yes, it was about
37, 38, I've forgotten.
Somewhere around about there, yes.
They've got a museum there, in Crystal Palace now. On a Sunday, open it on a Sunday, and they actually quite a good little museum which tells you about the history of the Crystal Palace. And there's artifacts there, some statues and stuff. There's a lot of stuff has been recovered and restored.
Yeah.
Because most stuff just got destroyed. Better than the Millennium Dome, I reckon, don't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
It lasted certainly a bit longer, probably.
Well, who were your parents, and did you have any brothers or sisters?
Yes, my parents were Edith and Hubert Peet. He was, or they were both, or became Quakers when they got married, and he in actual fact was in prison about 2.5 years, First World War, and eventually came out in the spring of 1919, and I was born the next year, and I had 2 older sisters and 1 older brother.
Was it conscientious objection? Is that why he was in prison? Or?
Yes, he was a Quaker and he was in prison as a conscientious objector.
So all Quakers are?
Not necessarily, but probably.
Right. Well, were you one yourself a Quaker?
Well, I was sent to a Quaker school and was, what shall we say, indoctrinated, or yes.
Right, I was at a Catholic school indoctrinated.
That sounds a bit strong. And I was a conscientious objector myself in the Second World War.
And did you have to go inside or not?
No, I didn't.
I know Michael Tippett did, didn't he? People like that did.
No, I joined a thing called the Friends Ambulance Unit that had been started in the First World War, and we did a lot of hospital work, and in fact I was amongst a party that went out to North Africa and working with the army, working in a mobile hospital, and eventually a couple of us, as it chanced, got taken prisoner in one of the Dodecanese Islands, and so I finished up as a prisoner in Germany for the last 1.5 years or so of the war. So it was quite an interesting mixture of experiences.
Vaughan Williams was in the ambulance unit in the First War, but I don't know if it was a conscientious objector or just...
Or maybe an ambulance driver. There were quite a lot of, I think I'm right, volunteer drivers and all sorts of things.
And what was the school that you went to?
It was one called Sidcutt in Somerset.
So it was a public school, a private school?
No, it was... I never know, this mixture of public and private. It was a Quaker school, a fee-paying school, boarding school.
That's what I meant, boarding.
Boarding school, and very unusual for the time, a co-educational. And in fact, my wife went there too. She was 5 years younger. I remember her there as a little girl.
That was strange, unusual, yeah?
No, that happens in quite a lot of old scholars of that school, as it happens. Yeah.
And what was your parents' work? What did they do?
Well, my father was a journalist, and he was a freelance journalist. Worked on 1 or 2 newspapers and freelance journalist, and by 1930 he became editor of the Quaker paper, The Friend, which is what he did for the rest of his life. He died in 1958.
Do you ever go and look at the issues of the Quaker Friend and that he edited? Do you?
Yeah, I mean, we're no longer Quakers, but not unconnected, and some of our friends are.
Now, I'm just thinking of the oral history aspect, because obviously, if he was editing a paper, there's a journalistic background to it.
Yeah, maybe there's a journalistic background in the family, or his father worked at publishers. He became a journalist, and my brother became a journalist. So there's quite a lot of that.
Is that what you went into after you left school, journalism? Then?
No, well, after I left school, the war started. I mean, I got a job for a year with Marion Grierson in a documentary unit in London, and then the war intervened, as it were.
How did you get the job with Marion Grierson?
Or why, or how?
Yeah.
Went through this, I think, at school, the process. I decided I would be a photographer, something like this, over the years. And then I thought I'd go into advertising, I believe. And then I thought I'd be a cameraman. These were various ideas. And anyway, when I left school, that's what I decided I would do. I taught myself with a 16mm camera, a couple of little silent films. I learnt as I went. And then with the help of somebody who introduced me to Basil Wright, who was still a young man then, one of the documentary group in London. He couldn't himself help me much, except suggest various books I read. But he introduced me, or gave me the name of Marion Grierson, one of John Grierson's two filmmaking sisters. And I got a job there as a kind of office boy and general help. That's for the first year before the war.
And what was she like?
Marion Grierson, charming woman. She and her sister Ruby, who was drowned filming a lot of children being taken to Canada. Ruby Grierson. Evacuees, yes. Marion Grierson, she was a very charming person. I had no real connection with her brother, I think. Or
what was she working on then? When
she was running a little unit called the, it's a great mouthful, Travel and Industrial Development Association Film Unit, making films for sending abroad about Britain, including silent films, because in those days sound had come in Western countries 10 years before, but there were still parts of the world which had silent films with captions. And so some of the films that were being sent out and made by this unit were silent.
Is that where you met Pearson? Was he working with her then?
No. At the beginning of the war, this little unit got taken over as the British Council's film department. Of the few people who were working in it, Marion Grierson must have pulled out because she didn't come as well. I'm not sure what she did, but there were 2 or 3 people from this unit. A cameraman called Frank Bundy, an editor, Alan Izod, who is still alive, lives in Scotland, and the British Council's film department was making films or procuring films for sending overseas about Britain, some publicity films about Britain. And one of my first jobs there as a kind of general assistant was viewing all the prints that were being chosen for a committee to view whether to send to the World's Fair New York, I think it was, in 1939 in the British Pavilion, which was an interesting job because I saw, without realising it, all the sort of pick of the documentaries films that had been made in the last few years. And at that period, this is the first few weeks of the war, I don't remember exactly the dates, there was a sudden rush on the big new cutting room. This was a beautiful new offices in Savile Row with a very lavish cutting room, editing room, with all the equipment in. And some of the films that were made in a great hurry at the beginning of the war by GPO Film, I forget the names of them, like Britain Can Take It and this kind of thing.
Harry Watt film, yeah.
Well, yeah, these various people, they came and used the cutting rooms, and I suppose it was hired out to them, which is a very interesting meeting named Jack Lee. I remember one morning coming in and seeing a rather huddled man sleeping on a pile of coats underneath one of the benches there that turned out to be Laurie Lee, who had been drinking rather heavily the night before, and that's where he spent the night.
Did Laurie Lee related to Jack Lee then?
Yes, brother.
Oh, right. Because there was a director called Jack Lee, there's Leigh.
No, this is L.W., yeah.
Oh, right.
Yeah. He went off, became a feature film director in Australia. Anyway, one day came in and there was an old man, to me old, I mean I knew later he was 65, but an old man with a pipe in his mouth, winding some films at one of the benches, and I went back into the other office and said, "Who's the old geezer in next door?" Because I wondered who on earth it was suddenly sitting there. And they said, "That's George Pearson." And I said, "Who the hell's he?" And I was told he was a feature film director of some repute from silent film days, whose luck had deserted him at the beginning of, or soon after the beginning of Talkie's time, and he was right down in his luck, out of a job, and they'd given him a job there as an assistant, £5 a week. That sticks in my mind. I don't know how I knew that. I suppose they told me £5 a week, and that's who he was. So I went back, and over the following days, because it was mainly myself and him working in that room, I found he liked nothing better than to take the pipe out of his mouth, which he shouldn't have had. A great notice saying no smoking, because it was all nitrate film, and tell me stories about the early days of feature film making, the films that he had made. And this was great, and we became good friends, which continued right on. He was 65 then, he died at, I think it was 97, magnificent old age, and was one of the reasons that much later at the BBC I was able to start a series called Yesterday's Witness, which were oral history films, because for a long time I'd been wanting to make a film of him telling his memories. I'd kept in touch with him, and people would say, "Who the hell's George Pearson? Never heard of him. What we want to make a film about him for?" But then I thought of an idea, and this is going ahead. This is way in late 1960s, for a series which I put on the memo that I wrote to my boss, an inexpensive series of people talking about the past and the work they did, and which got approval, and then I didn't have to say to anybody else, I'd like to make a film about old George Pearson. He was the very first person that I filmed for the series. And so in some ways that little connection, that day meeting him and hearing his stories, was very useful years and years later.
And that was sparked off your interest in oral history, hearing
yes,
talk
I mean,
about...
I've never heard of the phrase oral history. I didn't, in starting the series, I just, I forget the exact phraseology, like, yes, people talking about the past and the work they did. And,
You actually can see George Pearson in a film, I think made in 1912 or 13,
yeah.
in the Channel Islands with Martinek. It's called Rube's Little Girl.
Uh-huh.
It's not a very good film, actually, but he's one of the two smugglers. I'm pretty sure it's him, because he has a hat on, he's got this moustache.
Yeah.
And according to his autobiography, it's basically his first role as a producer. He produced it, and the other guy, Martinek, directed it. There's a very interesting film in the Imperial War Museum which he made in that 1915. It was a propaganda film, and it's cut really quickly, very unlike anything else. I think it's called For the Empire,
Mm-hmm.
which again is viewable. It's not. He obviously was a very versatile director. But let's just go back a little bit now.
Sure.
What were your first memories of the cinema?
Mm.
Did you ever go and see any silence in the 20s?
Well, yes. My first memory is being taken by my mother. Well, it doesn't matter where it was. It was on holiday in the Isle of Wight, and we saw Douglas Fairbanks in The Black Parrot. I think it was about 1925, 26, colour film, and I hardly remember it except scenes under the sea of people going down and finding lots of, valuable jewels and things inside a great chest in a sunken ship. It may be entirely a wrong memory, but...
Is it Raoul Walsh? I forgot. Actually, the colour article there, the colour man, he may have been involved in that, because the colour process would either be two-strip Technicolor or one of these early systems.
Would it be in 25? Yeah.
There would have been two-strip then.
Would it be Technicolor?
Two-strip Technicolor, which is, to me, is being colourblind, is not very good. It's all greens and browns.
Yeah.
But there was a Prismacolor going,
Yeah.
which this chap was working on in the 20s.
Well, I have no idea.
Yeah.
Except it was Douglas Fairbanks and other, not very many, other films, silent films in those days. As a family, the cinema was considered a little bit flippant. We had to, as children, say, there's an educational film about Disraeli or whatever. I remember that was one showing local cinema we must go and see.
So you didn't have any at school? Was on the school?
Yeah, not feature films, but we had a 16mm projector. In fact, I was a projectionist. That was another, interest in film making. Now, come to think of it, it wasn't 16mm, it was 35. A 35 projector, yeah, because I remember.
It's interesting because most educational films would have been 16, so it's 35.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we showed, can't remember what we showed, but certainly it was in a special projection box, and all the safety devices and stuff. Yeah.
So is that school still? Is this school still there?
Yeah. Yeah,
has it got its cache of films and projector still there?
It hasn't. I have no idea whether that room is used. If they show any films, it would be 16.
You did a program on one of your programs on coming of sound. Were you around when sound came? Did you go to any of the early sound films?
Yeah, but I don't.
Only 10, wouldn't you?
I don't. I was around about 10 or 11. I don't remember.
Because it wasn't in the family.
Fact. Or seeing first sound film. I don't recall this. No.
You've answered this partially already, but did you know many of the British documentary groups of the 1930s? And did you work with any of them? And what do you think of their films? You didn't mention, actually, Jennings. Did you come across him at all?
Yeah. I've got vague memories of him because at this, I presume it was the British Council, yes. I think at the beginning of the war, he was around and he had come along and he was wanting to make a film about a cargo ship in the Mediterranean, you know, whatever, going on its rounds, and he,
I've seen it.
it wasn't made. He had a cameraman, one of the cameraman GPO film in it, Jonah Jones or something like this, I can't remember who, and I was assigned to go with them as sort of general dog's body assistant. The film was called off because of the beginning of the war, and so I just met him that little bit then, so I hardly knew him, just knew him by sight.
And you said you went to Africa. When was that?
Oh.
How long was that for, and what did you do there?
Yeah. Well, after...
Straight after the war, was it?
No, not straight after the war. Straight after the war, I had a real kind of wanderlust, having been locked, well, maybe, or just generally wanting a little bit of adventure. Having been locked up might have been something to do with it in prison camp. And
where were you in prison camp? Sorry.
Sorry, it was in Germany and Austria.
How long were you there for?
For a total of nearly 2 years at the end of the war.
Where were you captured then?
On a little island in the Dodecanese, with a mobile hospital that had got there, you know, one of the movements of troops around during the war. And then one day a whole invasion of German troops came onto the island, and within a few minutes, or it seemed like an hour or two, we were prisoners, or rather we were just busy in the hospital under new management, shall we say.
And how was being incarcerated like then?
Well, it, compared with what many people went through, it was pretty good, except for a 10 or 11 day journey from Athens to what turned out to be Austria in cattle trucks, and that was pretty horrible because there was hardly anything to eat or drink, and 40 people in cattle trucks, but that was only that comparatively little period.
Did everybody survive?
In the cattle truck? Yeah, 1 or 2 people got badly ill and they got taken off somewhere in Hungary, I think, to hospital. Yeah, but I think, you know, morale and general behaviour began to break down after a few days. But it's, as I say, compared with the people that got huddled together like that and put off into concentration camp, it was a nothing.
No, because you were in hospital group and not a soldier.
No.
But they treated you differently.
On the train, no. Yes, sorry. If you were in the Army Medical Corps or had Red Cross card, we had Red Cross identity or cards. We were in the group who were put to work in camp hospitals or did nothing. We weren't sent down the mines or working on farms or anything like that. And by chance, the 2 of us from this ambulance unit who got taken prisoner at that time, by chance we were picked out on a list to be sent from Austria, where we'd been in camps 3 months, to we didn't know where, but it turned out to be a brand new camp hospital. In other words, there was a great building that had been some what's it called? Some training place, some school. A brand new building, and you know, barbed wire all round, which was a place where they were going to bring badly wounded and badly sick British prisoners and look after them until Red Cross trains came, and then there were exchanges of prisoners, exchanges of badly wounded and badly sick. which took place 4 times during the next, towards then until the end of the war. And that's where we worked. So it was a mixture of doing nothing for a few weeks and then more and more and more work as medical orderlies, and then the trains would come and off they'd go. So, sorry, where are we? Back getting a job in films. No, at the end of the war I went on a wander around Europe, and I picked up jobs teaching English in Czechoslovakia for 6 months, and then back in Paris, and came back to England and thought, this is, time to start being normal and get a film job, and because that's what I want to do. And it was much more difficult than I thought. I couldn't just walk in and pick one up. There was large numbers of unemployed in the film industry. And I went round to see people I'd known before the war. One of them was a man called Alan Izod, who I'd known at this first job I had, and he had just been appointed to go out to Central Africa to run a film unit, educational film unit. And he said, "What a pity you didn't come to see me a little while ago. I might have taken you on as a director cameraman, but I've got somebody who's coming, and so good luck and farewell." And I went out of the room, out of his office, and just afterwards he received a telegram from the man he had signed up, breaking his contract, saying he couldn't go. And he thought he'd get hold of me instead at short notice, a few days' notice, to come out to Africa. And through a series of far too complicated coincidences, that somebody in the room knew my sister and so on and so on. They got hold of me by that evening, and he offered me the job, and literally 5 days to say yes or no, to accept a 3-year contract in Rhodesia. And I just met my wife a few weeks before, so I went to her and said, "Do you want to go and live in Africa?" And she said, "Well, what do you mean?" And I said, "Well, I've been offered a job out in Central Africa making films." And she said, "Well, are you suggesting we get married?" And I said, "Yes, of course, but would you this is quite true, would you like to come?" And so we thought about it for a day or two, then went and told this man we'd go, or I'd go. On the contract, it was free passage for applicant and wife, you see, so we couldn't couldn't waste a free ticket on on a job. So there we are. That was 52 years ago. We got married 3 weeks later, and out we went, and came back 7 years later with 4 children, no job again, and then I started in earnest.
But you stayed for 7 years rather than 3. What did you do?
Sorry, I beg your pardon. It got extended.
And what sort of work did you do over there then?
It was very, in the simplest description, most of them were silent, believe it or not, silent colour films shot in Kodachrome, 16mm Kodachrome, showing entirely to African audiences, made as stories largely to help education of better elder culture, better hygiene, various stories about notable people, true stories, to encourage the others and so forth. It was a strange kind of time, living in a colonial society with all its prejudices, entirely doing work to help further the cause of what is now Zimbabwe and Malawi and Zambia.
Did you ever go back? Have you ever been back?
Yeah. Yes, we were back about 10 years ago.
And do you ever see any of the films that you made?
You mean since?
of those films that you made in Africa.
Oh, I see. Have they been shown here at all?
Well, have you seen them? Have you
Yeah,
got
I've got one or two, and there's one or two in the British Film Institute, in the archives. Yeah, and I showed them one or two of them on television when I came back in the middle 50s.
Was there any oral history involved in those?
No, because you see, they were quite a different kind of thing. They were, as I said, made silent and shown with a live commentator. A few were had their commentaries recorded with an English soundtrack, and they were for sending abroad. And there were some came to here to Rhodesia House and places. But it was a very good training for filmmaking, looking at it that way, because you had to tell the story by action. You know, as far as possible, the story had to tell itself by action.
But did you do political stories? Because the Mau Mau must have been around at the time in Kenya.
No.
Was there any fear in Rhodesia of the Mau Mau's situation?
That was later.
Was it later, was it?
I don't know when. No, it wasn't at the same period.
The 50s more than the late 40s then, was it?
It was, late 50s, I think. I really can't remember. And that was many miles away in another country.
There were no political sort of African uprisings or anything like that happening when you were there then?
No. I was back there a few years later when independence was coming to the various countries. Northern Rhodesia was about to become independent, and then Nyasaland. I finished up the last 2 years of the time with the extraordinary title of Films Officer Nyasaland, which I don't know what that really meant, but we're making the same kind of films, and also we were making newsreel items and for sending abroad and that kind of thing as well.
I mean, how much work did you do with the indigenous tribal people, or was it your
entirely?
Oh, entirely. So you didn't make anything to do with the white communities at all?
Almost not at all, except in these newsreels, or where the occasional white character of the local district commissioner or something was part of the story.
Did you see the programme on television last night, the interview with the Afrikaner leader?
Yeah. Oh, that was an extraordinary story, wasn't it? Extraordinary. It's an interesting style of filmmaking too.
Yeah, he's unusual. He is, I think.
Yeah.
There are some people who are like that. Who
yeah. I was fascinated with that.
Yeah, but it's interesting that but things don't change really in many ways.
No.
Right, you've answered my next question. So when did you return to England? When was that? And then what did you do?
It was 56. Yeah, 56. Came back to England and had to find a house to live in, whichever order this is, a job in film somehow, somewhere, and schools for the children to go to. And we got this house, oddly enough, where I'm sitting now, all those years ago, 1956, yeah, my God, and bought it from a certain gentleman called Dennis Healy, but that's quite beside the point.
The Dennis Healy, you mean?
Yes, Lee Dennis Healy, yeah.
Oh, right.
We happened to live here.
There was a plaque on the door one day saying that Dennis Healy and Stephen Peet lived here.
Precisely, yeah. No, that's not relevant. And then I thought, with all this experience, I'll be able to walk into all sorts of jobs that I want. And it was just the reverse. In the middle 50s, nothing going. And either as a cameraman or a director or whatever. And I didn't have a union ticket, that was the other difficulty. Although I got one fairly soon, because I managed to get a job with a documentary unit. There were many documentary units scattered around, mostly in London. Writing a script about, oh, do you know, I've forgotten, the town, a Scottish town, port town on the right hand side. Oh dear, this is stupid. Anyway, writing a script for a kind of industrial travel film about this.
Aberdeen.
Not Aberdeen. It's quite
Fort William.
quite absurd. It'll come back, pop back in my head very well. And that's really how I began again. And then I got little jobs. Directing various little documentaries of all sorts of things. One that was being made for United Dairies. Somebody else had written the script. It was called Milkman's Progress, a dreadful title, I thought. But that was done with actors. The milkman and one or two of the other characters were all professional actors. That was rather, and never worked like that before or since, with professional actors. And then, I can't remember what order these things are in. I just kept going. I got a job with Mary Oram, film editor, as her assistant. So I worked for a while as a editing assistant, which just kept us going with a little amount of money. And then I got one or two other documentary jobs. Oh yeah, including an extraordinary thing where I had to write the script and direct a film out in Swaziland over a period of two years or so, on several visits, about the building of a forest and the starting a pulp mill. And that was a combined film for the Commonwealth Office and courtholds. So, you know, a rather strange thing. And I did that. But it was several visits, so that it was, 2 months, and then had to do something else. And yes, now the most important thing, as far as I feel, is at some point I was asked if I could make, as cheaply as possible, a film for the Save the Children Fund. This was due to some personal contact who knew somebody who knew the Save the Children Fund public relations officer. They wanted a fundraising film made out in Korea about condition of children and refugees in southern Korea. And I agreed to do it. And I'd do it as a lone filmmaker, 16mm camera, perfectly acceptable style then still for making documentaries was to film mute, without any sound recording. Sound recording apparatus was so huge anyway. And then you had commentary and music, and that was the soundtrack. This was an acceptable style still. And I went, but before going, I went to BBC to see again Norman Swallow, who was head of the film department then, later became a producer, and said I was doing this, going out to Korea, South Korea, and he said, right, he just took a chance, he hardly knew me, and he said, if it's any good, when you come back, no, we will give you the film stock as our contribution. It was his personal arrangement. Film stock, and when you come back, we'll help you with a cutting room and a cutting room assistant. And if the film is any good, it'll be shown on television. An extraordinary verbal contract, which, what happened? I went, I shot this film, long period, came back, edited it, and then it was shown to head of programs, I can't remember the people's names, who said, don't change a thing, we'll get you best writer and some name as a commentator, and we'll show it. This was incredible looking back, and this is what happened. And its names keep going from me. Australian actor did the commentary. Now throw in that Australian actors' names. I'm sorry, I can't remember for the moment. And it was put out on Easter Sunday evening in prime time, and was made a big, you know, it had a big effect.
What was it called again?
It was called A Far Cry. Yeah, A Far Cry. It was about the condition of children in this far distant country. That started me off. I mean, firstly, it was, I know, it's a good film, possibly the best thing I've done. I did it from the guts. I was so angry at things that I saw out there. I made a film about to make the audience angry too. It started off over the next few years being asked to do other charity films in a similar way, similar style, and I made 4 altogether. One in Sicily about the conditions of living under the mafia. That was done somewhat surreptitiously. One in the Congo soon after independence, about the shambles going on and what the United Nations, various medical teams and others were doing out there. And another one about blindness in a valley in northern Rhodesia. This was just before northern Rhodesia independence. Well, it was nothing to do, it was an unpolitical film. Called it The Unseen Valley. And that, I know, that was a powerful fundraising film for the Royal National Institute for the Blind. That's who sponsored it. And gave them money for a clinic, mobile clinic to
Dunson
go out.
House, Dunson.
Yeah, I forget. Yeah. Anyway, so those 4 films actually are things I'm most proud of. They were done from the guts.
Do they still survive? You
Oh yeah, I've got those. I've got copies of those. Yes, indeed. All made in the same style.
Do the BFI and National Film Archive, do they have copies of them at all?
Not yet. No, oddly enough, Concord Films have asked me, and the man has taken over there from my old brain forgets names. He's viewing them now, and so that they're going to go there probably, and if not, the BFI can have them, or both.
No, it's just good if you've got 4. I mean, something that you, because I know that the NFT do archive each month, and every 3 months they have a documentary slot.
Yeah.
I mean, those, it sounds like they would make very interesting in the documentary slot there.
Yeah.
With you introducing the material.
Fair enough.
But I mean, that's something for you.
It's a possibility, yeah. Anyway, that's that period. I'm just trying to think. So then, oh, I know. I'll make it very quick. I got a job. World in Action. First year of
That's
World.
ITV now. Then you switched
ITV
over.
Granada. Yeah, well, not switching. It's just applying lots of places for
Right.
jobs. The first year of World in Action, which was a brand new style, hard-hitting, usually.
I remember the
hard-hitting.
music. Yeah.
Yeah, and a remarkable thing to work with, a man running it, wild Australian called Tim Hewitt, and again working as the odd one out. They had properly union size film department film crews for making the films, run by Samuelson Brothers.
Oh, really?
One of their biggest jobs, where they guaranteed a complete film unit the whole time, and a part unit for part-time for all the first months or the year or more, I think, of the World in Action running. But I was a director cameraman who went on odd assignments alone, usually. And I made a film for them in East Germany and another one in Algeria, although I did have another cameraman on that, and in South Africa. So I was doing the odd journeys.
You're like the nomadic person. You're the one that gets the fun jobs.
Well, yeah, they'd seen films I'd made. When I say on my own, I mean on the spot. Had to have interpreters and things, but working very small and editing my own material.
Oh! Good time it. First side down.
No.
Put on.
You hope.
Of course.
Editing my own material, yeah.
Just check the video, see if that's finished. I don't think I had that much film in it. But it's still going.
Oh.
Can't be that much left though.
Do you want to...
We'll just carry on, shall we?
anything you like, yeah.
Yeah, unless you want to...
No. Don't think so.
Right, carry on, sorry.
It's alright, where were we? Oh, World in Action. Yeah, it was the business of shooting on my own with local assistants and editing my own material. Or for some of them anyway. Certainly the first one I made, which was quite crazy, when I was taken on at Grenada. This is the end of 1962, to join the World in Action team, which was forming, but they hadn't had any programs on the air, obviously. I received an invitation to Leipzig Documentary Festival, which I've been to once or twice in East Germany, and went to Tim Hewitt, the Australian who ran World in Action, and said, if I go over to East Germany, next week or in a couple of weeks' time, and take my camera and some rolls of film with me, and I can persuade somebody to allow me to film there for a program, for a film for this program, is that okay? And he said, well, we're not very busy yet, Dad, but they won't, well, I won't describe, but it's too vivid kind of descriptions and adjectives he used. You won't get the hope in hell to permission to film in East Germany. So stay 2 extra days maximum, and then come back and get on with the work. You see. So I loaded my bag up with rolls of film and little Bolex camera, 16mm, and went to this festival. And as it's one that I've been to several times, or 2 or 3 times then, and films from Eastern countries, they were sent officially. Films from Western countries, it was people taking copies in a handbag, as it were, and because East Germany was a kind of no-go zone then. And I had 2 films with me that I'd made. One of which they agreed to show, that's right, one about blindness in northern Rhodesia, and one that they said, no, we don't want to show this. Fair enough. It was the one I'd made in Swaziland, and they didn't like it much. That's all right with me, but one day at the festival, one of the organisers said, the Minister of Culture wants you to go and have a drink with him so he can apologise for not showing both your films. So I thought, okay. And I went to this room, and a big bottle of sliver bits there, and he poured me out a stiff drink. And we had a conversation about this and that, and he apologised that they weren't showing it. I said, that's all right. Well, my boy, anything I could do to help you while you're here? I said, yes. Can I have permission to make a little film? Yes, anything you want. He was pretty drunk, but at least I think he must have been. He said, you know, just tell them to get in touch with me and all doors will be opened. And I was given a car and an interpreter and a minder. And made a film about life in East Germany. I made a film about rather boring life. It reminded me of Britain about 1940 when
austerity stuff.
Well, yes, indeed, exactly. And nothing about, or nothing on the lines of all the things that existed in the papers in those days, of headlines of people being shot trying to escape over the wall.
What you saw?
Yeah, what I saw. I chose 5 different people around the country. It was a deliberate, frankly, rather boring film about a country that you never saw pictures of or heard anything about. And I edited it over Christmas. And Tim Hewitt saw it and said, you know, great, Dad, that's fine. We'll put this on as the second programme. I think, it was the second programme in the series. It went on running 10 years. And yeah, that was quite an interesting job to have.
Did you ever come across Richard Massingham at all in your travels?
No, I just know the name.
Oh, right. And then, while you were in Africa, when you came back in this period, did you get in touch with Pearson again? Because I know he was working for the Colonial Film Unit.
Yes, he went on till he was 84 or something incredible. Yes, indeed. And while last in Africa, yes, I was in touch with him by letter. And one of the many people that I asked, you know, advice as to where I could get a job when I got back, I think his advice was the most important thing is to get a union ticket, if you can. So, as I said, I did fairly soon. When I went to, and because I'd got it, when I went to Korea on my own to make this film, first film of that sort that I'd done, I wrote for permission to work on my own because of the special circumstances, and got a special union permission, you know. In this case, for this cause, you have permission to work like this. So I just wanted to make sure I wasn't going to lose my union ticket for working on my own.
Did you style yourself after anybody, or just did what you wanted, or?
No, didn't.
No influences?
Obviously there were influences, but I'm not conscious of styling myself. No. I did things the way.
I mean, the 30 TPO film did that influence you? The films they made on housing conditions and.
Don't think so. I mean, they were interesting to see, but they were made by a big team, and I was very much a loner. I think that might be an answer. Yeah. No, I.
About the neo-realism films from Italy, Rossellini and those, did you ever see any of those at all?
Obviously I got influenced, but I'm not conscious of it.
Yeah. And do you think anybody has been influenced by your work in documentary filmmakers?
Yeah, but the Yesterday's Witness series, which turned out to be the first oral history television films, that did. Particularly Steve Humphries in Bristol, who, as it were, kind of followed in my wake. No, followed. No, yes, I'm aware of that influencing people.
And was there a gap between the World in Action and starting up the
BBC?
BBC?
Yeah, World in Action. Beg your pardon. Then when I left that, it was the This Week programme, which was Associated Rediffusion in those days. Firstly it was.
Yeah.
Oh, so.
That's slightly off or not.
Okay. firstly it was a film for rediffusion. About women in prison. It turned out to be the first film made in women's prisons. Been several since. That was interesting.
Which one was that? Which prison was that? Women's clubs?
No, Holloway.
Holloway.
Women.
Holloway, of course.
Holloway and Style. The 3 prisons. There was Holloway, and then an open prison, and then
Wasn't there one of Strange Ways by Dennis?
Yeah. Dennis
Mitchell, was it?
Mitchell, yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Oh, there've been quite a number. This was 1965, I think. And from 64, and then finished at. Then worked on the This Week programme as a director. That was quite a change. A big crew, researcher, interviewer. After working on my own,
Didn't
working
like
with
it.
about 10 people, I didn't, frankly. I found it difficult. It's a difficult style. And then after that, I got Jeremy Isaacs was producer of This Week, which was interesting, and I got the push from that because I was abroad on something. I saw the memo that I was a freelancer, and there were staff people of This Week that were back in England twiddling their thumbs, and I was off as a freelancer on a job abroad, and this won't do, and my contract came to an end. I mean, it wasn't my fault, but then I managed to get a job. Bristol BBC. All the time I was trying to head for the BBC and not getting anywhere, not going to interviews and not getting anywhere. And but I did get a job in Bristol for 3 months, 6 months, making series of films on different subjects with reporters. And then, whilst in Bristol, I'd been back in London, trying to see if I could get a job BBC in London, because we lived here, and without success, and saw all sorts of people. I was offered a 2-year contract in Bristol, and we were almost ready to pack up here and go and move to Bristol, when I got a call from Gordon Watkins. Yes, I remembered somebody's name. Gordon Watkins offering me a job in BBC London. And came back. It's funny here, it's a blank. But anyway, I came back, and that's right. And I got a job, beg pardon me, it was somebody else, with the documentary department on a 3-month contract, documentary department run by.
You should be what? Late 50s now, is it?
Yeah. No, middle 60s. 67 or so. That's right. Oh, I know what it was. Oh, God. First, it was making some films with Malcolm Muggeridge.
Oh, great. I like him.
That was quite a challenge.
You didn't do the one with Lord Reith, did you?
Yeah.
Oh, that's brilliant.
3-hour-long things with Lord Reith. That was quite extraordinary, because I had a 3-month contract, and there was Muggeridge, who had persuaded Lord Reith to be interviewed, and I've given the job of filming, directing and filming that, and almost at once, Lord Reith began phoning up and saying, "I've decided to call the whole thing off. What are you going to do about that?"
It's like Alistair's theme, you know. Yeah, it reminds me of.
And and just as I'm sort of stuttering my reply, he'd talk about the next, he was just trying it on.
He wanted to direct it himself, probably.
I don't know. Anyway, that was quite a strain and very interesting, and we decided to film up in Glasgow. By chance, he was rector of Glasgow University, and Muggeridge was rector, if that's the right word, of Edinburgh University that year. So we had the meeting up there and talking, and the first piece of the filming was him talking about his life, early life. He was born in Glasgow. And then all the rest was a long interview done in his flat in London. Oh dear, it was a real strain, and a great deal of material. Of the two of them, shot with two cameras. I'd never done this before. I had to work out system of signalling to the camera when one was to zoom and the other not, and all the rest of it. So that and a big, or two crews. It was quite a thing. But so Muggeridge and Reith, and then we got the period for editing it into a film, and there was so much good material. I decided we got to use this time that I'd been allocated in my contract to edit a full-length, hour-long film about Reith at the BBC and all his afterlife, which there was plenty of interview about, and his early life. Would be two other films, I hope. But probably broken the microphone. Oh God. So we spent all our time working really hard with these transcripts and stories, and made an hour-long, more or less final cut of Reith at the BBC. This got shown to head of programmes and said, great, that's fine. And I said, I'd used up all my contract time. I said, I got enough material for two other films, Have you? All right, we'll have to extend your contract. Yeah, the whole thing was a gamble, and they did. And we made 3 films that went out. Oh dear.
They're some of the most famous films now, really. People still remember the Reith films, the Muggeridge films. Not the Stephen Peet films, but the Malcolm Muggeridge interviews.
Yes, indeed, they are. The Muggeridge interviews